Yeah, my favorite is I just want to get in shape for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, backwards. Like, you're doing it backwards.
Like you could be, a triathlon athlete. You could be like a marathon runner. Man, when you get put in side control and the guy's cross-facing you and you're panicking because you have no idea what to do, like there's no amount of physical training that can really prepare you for that, because people really don't understand fighting until they feel it. Then they realize just how fucking useless they are.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight as Alpra.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Today, I have with me the host of That Jiu Jitsu Podcast, also formerly known as the Irish Car Bomb, Justin Lesko. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Matt, thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to our chat. I'm a big fan of your show, and I just like talking jiu-jitsu, so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming here. Pleasure's all mine. Guys, please like, share, subscribe. Check the links in the bottom. All right, Justin. So you are a former pro MMA fighter, obviously a content creator. You have I glanced over your Instagram page and checked out your podcast. Great content. A lot of cool different topics that you talk about on your Instagram page, which I really, really like. Like, it's not all just how to do this move or how to do that, but also you're staying up to date with MMA news, jiu-jitsu news, basically everything grappling and MMA, which is very, very cool. Can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, man, for sure. I appreciate the kind words. Like you said, I was a pro MMA fighter. I got into jiu-jitsu because my cousin took me to watch Rampage Jackson knock out Chuck Liddell at UFC like 60 something or whatever. And I kind of just realized that in all sports in my life, I've preferred to play a sport to watch a sport. So after watching the UFC for a few years, I was like, man, maybe I should try this. Maybe this would be fun. And I started jiu-jitsu. And a year later, I had my first amateur MMA fight. And I was like, all right, I'll just check this thing off the bucket list. I'll do an amateur MMA fight. I was supposed to move from Pennsylvania back to Florida after my fight. And I won. I choked the dude out. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good at this. That was fun. And then on the night, the promoter was like, hey, can you fight again in a month? And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll just push back my move and I'll fight again. And then I won that one and I won a few more. And then I canceled my move to Florida because I stayed in Pennsylvania to keep training, and then eventually turned pro a few years later. And it's definitely the coolest thing about me that I was a professional MMA fighter, because if you ask my wife, I'm like the nerdiest person you'll ever meet, which doesn't really jive with beating people up in a cage. But in 2016, I broke my arm in a fight. The guy went for a head kick and I blocked it and kicked my arm, broke it. Had to have 4 surgeries because I had a bunch of infection in the bone and it wouldn't heal and all that. So it was kind of the end of my MMA career. And now I just compete and fight jiu-jitsu full time. I got sort of into the content creation stuff sort of as just a joke, and we can talk about that too for sure. But I have the luxury of, I work from home. I have the time. I like to make content. So I'm in a rare position where, because I'm afforded the time to make it and it's fun for me, I've sort of developed a little bit of a following on social media. I think it's super douchey to brag about your social media. I just don't like that vibe of hey, everyone, look at my stuff. I'm super cool. I'm a content creator, but it is a big part of my life. It's something that I love to do, and we can definitely dive into the weeds on that. But I think that's pretty much it. Used to beat people up, got beat up. Now I do jiu-jitsu.
Do you miss MMA?
I miss the training more than the fight. I miss really being solely dedicated to one physical thing in that training camp, pushing my body as far as I can go. And I think that I learned a lot about myself in training for fights, because you get kind of into the depths of what can my body take, how far can I go, how much can I handle and survive. Fight day was always super nerve-wracking. Looking back on it, I feel very guilty about making my now wife and my mom watch me get punched in the face, in a cage. I don't regret putting them through that, but it's definitely something I'm aware of now that I have kids and thinking about, would they want to do that too? It's weird. Like I miss the super, super hard work, not necessarily the payoff. Even if my arm wasn't broken now, even if I was like, maybe I'm going to make another run at 37 years old, I'm going to find some old man MMA league and go for it. I don't think I could do it. I couldn't get my headspace into that like murder mode of that week of the fight where it's just like turning into a killer to have to go fight somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I miss it. It was the best time in my life for finding out what I could do and who I could be and what I could take. But I don't think that I could ever really get myself back there again, if that makes sense.
I've had people, I'll be 37 in February as well. I've had people tell me pretty much since I started jiu-jitsu, they've been like, hey, are you thinking about doing MMA? Is that something that you want to do? And I'm like, well, of course it's something I've thought about. Like it's, I love watching UFC and I think every young dude in their 20s always envisions themselves. If you're a martial artist, you envision yourself in a fight constantly.
Right.
And
that's why we do it.
Right. And I've never had a cage fight. I've had a couple street situations, never used jiu-jitsu, unfortunately. But the thing that always held me back from doing MMA, I mean, obviously, injuries and things like that. And like, I'm not passionate about striking or anything like that. So it would be something that would be forced rather than something that would be natural for me. But I've always thought like, man, what if I won my first fight? And like, what if I like dominated the guy? Then I'd be like, well, I can't stop. Like you'd be like, fuck, I got to keep doing this because I won. And like, I could totally see something like that just engulfing my life. And for me, when I think about the future, like I try to see things steps ahead, right? Just like in jiu-jitsu, you try to see things steps ahead. I think like 5-10 years ahead. It's like, what does my life look like if I go down the path of like a pro MMA fighter? I mean, it's selfish. Like like you said, you got to put your loved ones through situations where they're watching you get your head kicked in and injuries and just the dedication that's required. And I just knew that I wouldn't be able to dedicate myself fully and do the sport the respect that it deserves in order to succeed. Like it wasn't something that I absolutely must do. And I feel like, it's like that old saying where if a pro fighter gets asked, hey, should I become a pro fighter? It's like, no, you shouldn't, because you have to ask me, right? If you have to ask me, then it's not meant for you. It's only meant for those who are like obsessed with fighting, Yeah.
Well, that was, my story was I was 6 months into jiu-jitsu as a white belt, and like someone at your level and skill right now, what a 6-month white belt is. Like it's nothing. Like it's nothing. And I was like chomping at the bit, like asking like my coach, like, let me get a fight. And, we had a couple guys in our gym that were, established in amateur careers. We had a couple guys who were fighting pro. One of my old teammates was on the Ultimate Fighter. So like we were in the right spot. Like I was where I needed to be. But to your point, like I was the one being like, get me a fight. And they held me back for like a year because that is a 6 months old white belt. You don't know shit. You don't belong in a cage. But yeah, when you think about like, there's certain parts of your life where you can look at and like, if something went different, my life would be completely different. And for me, it's that very first amateur MMA fight in Philadelphia in an old warehouse up on like the 3rd floor of some rundown building, where if I lose that fight, I don't have my wife right now. I don't have my kids. I definitely don't live where I live because, like I said, I was going to move back to Florida with my then girlfriend. The only reason I stayed in Pennsylvania was because I won that fight. If I lost that fight, it's like, all right, I did that thing I wanted to do on my bucket list. And now let's move 1,200 miles away. I don't meet my wife. All that stuff that led me to right here would be completely different if I didn't win that fight. And
right. I
mean, obviously I look at it as I trace a direct line from like that fight to my children. So I can't ever be like, I regret fighting MMA or I regret, the injuries that I had because of it or having to live intentionally poor. You can't really work a 40-hour-a-week job and be a pro fighter. You kind of have to just make ends meet and live on your parents' couch while you're training to fight because that's what you have to do. I don't regret that because it got me to where I am. But that hardship at the time, it's not for everyone. And people who get into MMA and get into jiu-jitsu because they think that's going to be their ticket to money and fame doesn't happen that way. Like no. It's the opposite. You have to agree to live very poor for a very long time in the hopes that one day maybe you make it. But what it takes to make it is, it's not just winning your fights. Like I had a teammate who was like 22, 23-0. UFC's not calling because all his fights were super boring. He was just laying and praying on people. They don't want to see that. So you need to win fights that are exciting that people want to watch. You need to not get hurt. You need opponents to not get hurt and miss weight and cancel fights at the last minute. You need to be able to live that life of, do I have a couch to sleep on? Can I sleep in my car? Can I sleep in the gym? That's a lot of factors that all have to come into play for you to even make it to the UFC and then try to stay there and then try to be a champion and then try to make John Jones money. Like, it doesn't happen very often. It's not for everyone.
No. Even in jiu-jitsu, it's very difficult to, make a living as a pro athlete. There are very, very few. And I knew that going into jiu-jitsu right around when I got my purple belt. I was starting to run a couple of classes at the gym that I was training at. And I was thinking ahead, like, I was a very much aspiring chef. Like I was a Red Seal chef at the time. That was like my passion. I really wanted to go all the way with that. But then when I discovered jiu-jitsu, it just like, I felt this force kind of pulling me in that direction. And I thought, okay, well, let's say I'm going to go and try to make a living off of this. How am I going to do that? And I was competing and I was winning local tournaments, but I was like, realistically, the only way I'm going to be able to feed a family is by running an academy. And I like teaching. So that actually sounded like a pretty awesome life, And then I realized like, I'm not going to be making a living off of being a competitor. I'm going to be making a living off of teaching and having a school and running the school. And so that's, when I got that idea in my head, I basically just started training all of my focus on moving towards that goal. And one of the best things I ever did. It's like you said, what if you had lost that fight? Like you're almost at like a fork in the road. And I try to talk to my kids about this in class. Sometimes we do like mat chats or whatever. And it's like, sometimes you'll be at a fork in the road in life and you may not even realize that you're at that fork in the road, but it's like you could choose to go one direction or the other. And depending on what you go with, your life will be completely different. Like I met my wife at a party, and if I had never gone to that party, or let's say I never, sparked up a conversation with her, it's like I wouldn't be married with her right now. I wouldn't have my 2 kids. I wouldn't have my life would be completely different, right? And we never know what day is going to come where we meet ourselves with a fork in the road and we have to make a decision like that. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think especially too, like for me, when I started fighting, I was like in my mid-20s, and I think especially like in that age range, you don't really think of like the impact of decisions that you'll make. Like you're not thinking, oh, I'm going to do this fight to lead to this, to this, to this, to this. It's just, I'm going to do this fight because I want to do this fight. And then all these ripples happen through time that maybe you really couldn't predict. But if you don't make certain decisions, like you said, certain things don't happen. And, I was going to ask you about like owning a school and teaching and stuff, because for a long time, that's what I sort of envisioned for myself, was that I wanted to just, train and get as good as I could, and then find somewhere with, not maybe a school, maybe an untapped market, open a school, then open 10 of them, and then, have a private jet because I have, I'm rivaling Gracie Baja in their the franchise size. And then I kind of got away from that, where I just was like, I was seeing all the headaches that my instructors were having running their schools. And like, have you ever had that where you maybe wanted to pull back and some of the headaches became too much of a headache? Or have you always been like focused on what you wanted to do and never really questioned it?
It's a good question. for me, I've spoken on the podcast before where I think that I was born to like be an instructor of some sort, and I've always sort of followed my passions, and cooking was one of those things. Like I used to really want to be a cooking instructor. My favorite times in my culinary career were at college when I went to cooking school. And man, seeing the instructors and what they got to do, I was like, this is fucking sick. Like that's what I want to do. I want to work with people and teach. But then when my focus shifted to jiu-jitsu, I realized, hey, I really enjoy teaching jiu-jitsu as well. I get the same sort of energy and satisfaction when it comes to instructing jiu-jitsu. But if I do jiu-jitsu, like I'll be able to do something that I love. It's good for, well, in theory, it's good for your body, right? It's actually fucking awful for your body, but like, it's a healthy activity. You're getting like really good exercise.
There's worse things you could do. You could be a bull rider. So there's worse things you could do.
Right. And it's like a lot of chefs, they have issues seeing their families. The hours are really difficult. Their health usually isn't too good. And so I decided to switch careers. And when I did that, to be honest, I've never really looked back. And that's because it's kind of like what I talked about earlier in the episode, where it's like, if you know what you want to do and you want to be like a pro fighter and that's in your blood, it's like, you will just find a way, because that's your goal. And that's 100% the direction you must go into. Like it's almost like that's your purpose. And so I felt like this was my purpose. And so it wasn't difficult for me to go through like the headaches or, to persevere when like things like COVID happened and like, you have difficulties starting things up and you're not having any students show up to your classes and all the things that every gym owner goes through. Like that, it wasn't difficult for me to keep going because I knew that was like the life that I wanted to have 10 years from when I started, which is ironically enough, next year will be the 10-year anniversary of my school. So it's like, I am pretty much where I want to be. And I do consider it successful at this point. So, despite all of the setbacks and the bullshit, I don't think I regret it for a second. And that's where I know that, I took the right choice, I think.
10 years is crazy too. Like that time goes by so quickly. And that's like the thing, like I always say about like jiu-jitsu is like the time's going to pass anyway. Like if you don't want to start jiu-jitsu now and you're waiting, like before you know it, it's going to be 10 years has gone by. And like, it's crazy to think of like, I think a lot of people look forward 10 years and they're like, oh, I'll probably be pretty much the same person and my life will be pretty similar. But like, if you look back 10 years as to what was happening in your life 10 years ago, you couldn't have predicted what it is now. So like to think that 10 years of change and things being different in your life got you to this point. In the next 10 years, nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to be different. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes if you look back, you can kind of measure how crazy your life can get in a not super long period of time. And that's why when people, like, I always hear people talking all the time about like, oh, I want to get in shape first before I start jiu-jitsu, or, oh, I want to wait till my schedule, or, oh, New Year's resolution, or blah, 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 blah. Like, just get to it, dude, because like the time is going. Yeah. The time is ticking by.
Yeah, my favorite is I just want to get in shape for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, backwards. Like, you're doing it backwards.
Like, you could be a triathlon athlete. You could be like a marathon runner. Man, when you get put in side control and the guy's cross-facing you and you're panicking because you have no idea what to do, like there's no amount of physical training that can really prepare you for that. And that's such a like a normie thing to say, right? Because people really don't understand fighting until they feel it. Then they realize just how fucking useless they are. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then usually what I notice is most people will have like, that's their fork in the road. And they decide either, man, this is crazy, I have to learn this. Like I must become competent at this, or they'll be like, well, I'm never fucking doing that again. Right. That was the worst experience of my fucking life. Right. You know what I mean? Do you teach?
I used to teach a lot at the school that I was training at. And then, so I moved right before COVID. I moved from Pennsylvania to New Jersey. It's where my wife, her family is from. So it was like an hour-ish from where I was living. And I was still driving to the school that I had started at. I went, white belt through brown belt at one school. And then I was teaching a weekly class there. I was teaching a leg lock class there on Saturdays. And then COVID hit and everything really shut down. And then once things got ramped back up again, there was just sort of a natural break that happened where I'll never badmouth the school or anything. I had great experiences there, and I think
I will if you want to. I can badmouth schools I've been at.
Well, I'll send you a DM with the name of some of the places I've trained, and then in like 2 episodes, so people can't connect the dots, you go on and badmouth them, and then I'll share it, and that'll be like the passive aggressive way to do it. Mm-hmm. But it was just a sort of natural break that happened where I realized that I didn't want to drive an hour to be there anymore. And
oh yeah, that's tough.
So I started training at the school that I'm at now, which is much closer. And it's one of those things where when you only train at one place and then you go to a different place, sometimes it opens up your eyes a little bit to maybe some of the things that your eyes were closed to at the place you're currently at. And
sure.
I realized that the top of my first school wasn't necessarily seeking out improvement and the top at the school I'm at now is constantly seeking out improvement. So I started to realize that maybe there was a ceiling I was going to hit where there was no new information going to be coming to me, that maybe my game would get to hit a limit, and I didn't want that. And I'm glad that the switch had kind of happened. Like it wasn't like a falling out and like I hate that place and I'll talk shit about that place. I think it's a great school. The best way I can say it is there was a sort of natural divergence.
Yeah.
And
it sounds like it's a gym culture thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think, I've done a couple videos, I've done a couple episodes on like what to look out for at a bad school. And then I've also done the flip side because you need content, what to find at a good school. And on both of my lists has always been, if your instructor doesn't have an instructor or isn't seeking out new things, it's not a reason to be like, I'm never training there. But you also need to realize that maybe you might have to do more legwork for getting new information. You know what I'm saying? Like if your instructor isn't trying to improve their game, not even having an instructor or an affiliation, because I think that can be scammy too. And we can, there's a lot of stuff in jiu-jitsu that's not cool. But if your instructor's not seeking to improve their own game, you're going to run into a limit. There's only a finite amount of stuff they can teach you if they're not bringing new things in. And for some people, I think that's okay. For some people who do jiu-jitsu as a hobby and as a workout and as exercise, that's fine. And like, I know I'm never going to be Gordon Ryan and be the best grappler in the entire world. I know that's not going to happen, but I don't want there to be a limit on what I learn, what I know, and what I can do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I had a similar situation with a gym that I was at. The gym was actually, I don't give a fuck, I'll name it. It was called West Coast BJJ. And it was like a gym that was actually, I got to say, my first instructor, his name was Don Whitefield. He had done some extensive training with Ricardo De La Hiva, who, as we all know, is like a BJJ legend, right? Allegedly a rapist, right? But aside from that, he developed this De La Hiva guard, and this was in a time when everybody was basically passing on their knees, and everybody was either playing close guard or half guard, right? And it was like, I remember when I first started, like there were a lot of schools that were just passing on the knees, and it was just like, it was starting on their knees, like bullshit type jiu-jitsu, right? But then somebody got the idea, hey, we can stand up and pass the guard. And so this developed, it necessitized the need for a open guard. And then so De La Hiva starts being used, and single X and all types of different guards. And he was one of the guys who brought that to the Lower Mainland, the Metro Vancouver area here. in BC, and there really wasn't a lot of dudes who were doing stuff like that. And I gotta say, ethically, I'm not a big fan of Don. He's done some greasy things, and at the end of the day, we split because of political reasons. He didn't want me cross training with somebody he didn't like. And I'm teaching for this guy. He's paying me, and his gym is 5 minutes from my house, and it's very convenient and all this. And I'm getting money doing jiu-jitsu, which is very exciting for me as like a 20-year-old, 23-year-old person trying to make a living off jiu-jitsu. And I made the decision to leave because of that political issue, because of the culture of the gym had changed. Because when he first came in, man, a lot of the high level gyms in the area and the high level people that I know of that I came up with really, really got good at jiu-jitsu because of Don, because he was kind of bridging the gap between old school and new school. But as time went on, the gym became more about like, literally like Lloyd Irving type tactics to get people in the door, to get more and more people. It became all about just money. A lot of the good people started to leave, and basically the whole gym culture fell apart. All the good guys left. They went on to either have MMA careers or they went to open their own gyms. There was a time when, man, it was like one of the sickest teams, if not the best team in Vancouver, with all these young up and comers. And then it fell apart probably in the span of like a year. And I got to witness that. And I was like, holy shit, like the whole thing just came crumbling down. And then that's when I knew that it was time for me to go, because I was like the last one left. And I did have the ability to be the person to kind of keep this, I could keep the gym competitive, and I could be the one to kind of take the gym into more of a modern era. I was getting into like Barambolos and things like that. But then we had that falling out, and I realized, there's convenience and money can't put a price on like the quality of the training. And so I started traveling like a half an hour each way to go to a different gym where I got better training. And sometimes you have to make decisions like that, right? That's another fork in the road type moment. And so I've been through situations where I've seen what I thought was a good school become, not somewhere where I'd recommend somebody to train anymore. And when I left, I never looked back. And it honestly, not only did I get better training, but I got to network and realize that, hey, there's a whole other jiu-jitsu community out there in Vancouver. And I could make relationships with people that I couldn't make before, because it was kind of contained. Almost, I don't want to use like GB as an example, but these big box gyms, they don't really take kindly to cross training, right? And so when you go and you explore a little bit, when you get to move outside of those environments, you realize like there's a lot more to this sport and this community than just what I see in my gym.
Well, and that's the thing too, is like, I would always tell people who are just getting into jiu-jitsu and training that you need to be able to cross-train. Like, you should go to other schools to train, because you just don't know what you don't know. And if you start at a school, you might just think that's what jiu-jitsu is. And if you go and cross-train, number one, it's going to tell you if there's a big red flag where the school you train at gets mad about that. I think that's a very big issue if people don't want you cross-training. I think a good instructor knows they're a good instructor, so they wouldn't worry about you cross-training, because they're not worried about losing you as a student, because they know that their jiu-jitsu is good.
No, exactly. And if you have confidence in your program,
right,
then you're not going to mind when people cross-train.
Right. And I'm glad that I've trained at different schools. I've visited different schools. I try to always pack a gi and a rash guard when I go on vacation and try to find a school. And you can see what's good, what's not good, and how a school should be, and some things that shouldn't happen at a school. And, I'm always of the mindset of, I want a school to train at, and fortunately all the schools I've ever trained at long-term have been this way, but the rounds have to be hard. When we're rolling, like, it's rolling. It's not trying to hurt each other. It's not cranking heel hooks to, rip knees apart, but it's hard rounds. It's hard physical training. But I also don't want, like we mentioned, Baja, like, I don't want bowing to pictures, and I don't want asking for permission to get water, and I don't want military structure, or you don't speak unless spoken to, and God forbid a blue belt asks a brown belt to roll, they're going to get whipped or something. Like, it should be a laid back, comfortable environment when you're drilling, and you should like being there. You should like being with the people you train with. But when the rounds start, like, it's fucking rounds, like, let's go. And I think it's hard to find schools like that, where I think it's either a school that usually has very good rounds, it's very militant, and a school that's laid back during drilling is like flow rolls that aren't really doing much for you. So if you can marry those two together and find that blend, I think that's the best culture for jiu-jitsu. And I think by cross-training, you can start to have your eyes opened a little bit to, this is what I don't like about a school, this is what I do. And it can confirm for you whether or not you're in the right place. And you don't know that if you don't experience different places. And someone being against you cross-training, I think, is a problem.
100%. I think we're past, the old, we're past the old culture where, or at least I hope we are. I know there are places out there that aren't, but we're kind of past that old school Brazilian mentality where it's like, the gym down the street is our enemy.
Right. If
you go there, you're a traitor.
Right.
You're not allowed here. We have secrets. You're not allowed to show them our secrets. Like, I do believe that it's valid to want to keep certain information away from people you might potentially compete with. Like, sometimes I'll discover something, and this goddamn cat, I swear to God, if you're watching, she's all up in my business.
I mean, she's cute, so we'll let it slide.
Yeah, that's fair. Look at this. Now she wants to go on the fucking desk. Like, fuck off. Go. I love you, but come on. But like, sometimes I'll discover something and I'll be like, man, like, this would be a great Instagram reel. But then I'm like, well, I don't really want people knowing this yet. Like, I know there's a shelf life on novelty when it comes to techniques. It's like, when you discover something new, if you put it out in the world, like, I know that people I might potentially compete with are going to be watching my reels, right? Like, and so it's like, well, I might want to try and use this against them potentially, or I might want my students to use this against their students. Yeah. And so it's not like this, like, oh, if you tell secrets, you're a traitor type thing. But there is definitely there are still advantages that can be had in competitions and things like that. And we are. We're our gym culture. And again, the proper gym culture for you, the best gym culture for you is subjective. It's whatever your goals are. But my goals are to win competitions and have my students win competitions. So it makes sense that I don't want to just give everything out there that I discover right away, right? Even though I am excited to show what I know. It's like, I don't want to always just give those secrets away. But I think we're away from, like, cross training is being a traitor. And you should have to tiptoe around that topic. And, if you go to another gym, it's, you don't let your professor see, like, that type of mentality. Yeah. I think if you're at a school that is like that, that's a pretty big red flag. There's just, the truth is that, what secrets am I going to be able to, am I going to have that are so valuable that, like, Gordon and Danaher are showing all these DVDs that anyone can get. Like, I don't have better secrets than those guys. In fact, most of the shit that I teach, I just steal from them. So it's like the information is out there now, whereas, 16 years ago when I started jiu-jitsu, that information didn't exist. Like, nobody was doing leg locks back then. A couple of Japanese guys and catch wrestlers were doing leg locks. Aside from that, nobody was doing it. And now all that information is available. So what the fuck? Like, the information is out there. If you're willing to look for it, it's not hard to find it. So I think this whole, like, creonch keeping secrets type thing is a little bit ridiculous nowadays.
Yeah, I'm actually coming out of, I just competed a couple weeks ago in a sub-only match, and I have, like, a backlog now of content that I can post because it was all stuff that I was hoping to do in the match. But like you said, I'm not giving away a secret. It's not a brand new technique no one's seen. But I know the guy I'm going to go against is probably going to see my Instagram and look at my reels because I'm going to look at his Instagram. Like, I'm going to look him up. Like, why would you not? And I really wanted to hit a foot sweep because I've been working a lot of foot sweeps. Well, guess what? I'm not going to post for a month before I match a bunch of foot sweeps.
Right.
Like, I'm just not going to post that stuff. So from a competitive standpoint, like, yeah, definitely maybe don't go to the gym down the street and be like, hey, this is all the stuff we're working on for this upcoming tournament.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that's kind of rude.
yeah, maybe just like keep that to yourself. But like also, it's not really a big deal if you go down the street and are just working your game. You know, like I think there's malicious intent is obvious malicious intent, and just training jiu-jitsu is just training jiu-jitsu. So like if you're, if like my instructor has a seminar at our school and I go run down the street a week later and I'm like, hey, this is all that was the stuff that was taught at the seminar. This is how you do it. Like, that's kind of malicious intent. But if I'm just going to train and I'm working on the stuff that I just learned, I'm just doing jiu-jitsu, and like you said, I think we're past that culture. But I did put up a reel like 2 months ago about Gracie Baja and some of their weird, like, cultish behavior. And there was a lot of discourse in the comments of people still defending that old school mentality. So I do think it's still out there. I still think there's people who are, how dare you talk bad about GB and how dare you talk bad about etiquette. I'm doing air quotes for anyone who's just listening. Etiquette in a jiu-jitsu school. Yes. But I think that's just, like you said, it's for your school it's subjective. And if that's what you like, that's what you like. Then me, a dummy on Instagram, is not going to change your mind. But I do think some of what you do is silly.
Mm-hmm. Did you win your match?
I did. I hit a calf slicer that I've actually been working for a long time where this will be very difficult to explain. But basically, he was working for a toe hold and turned away to finish it. I was able to defend the toe hold, and then on my free leg, tucked it into the crook of his knee from behind. And if you've seen the Charles Oliveira calf slicer that he hit on, what's his name, like many years ago in the UFC, where he pulls him back.
Was
on
he belly
top.
up?
He was. Yeah. So we basically ended up in, he was trying to false reap. I stepped over. I grabbed a toe to counter it. He grabbed my toe as well. So I ended up sitting facing his back basically. And he was like not quite belly down, but like kind of turned away for the toe. And as I retracted my foot and changed the angle, I threw the foot, my shin into his knee, pulled his hips on top of me and got the calf. And if anyone wants to go to @JustinLesko, you can see it. It's pinned on my profile. But, I got to do my selfless plug. But I felt good because that's something that I worked on. It's something that I didn't post on Instagram for a long time because I've been catching that off of inversions and off of defending the toe and all that. So like to your point, there's some competitive advantage that can be had by not sharing everything that happens, even though I like to share a lot of things that happen. I like social media.
Yeah. Do you hit a lot of slicers?
I do. I think it's an underrated part of the leg lock game that I think a lot of times, like especially no-gi bolos, people leave that leg behind and what was your de la hiva is still stuck behind the leg as they're trying to defend the bolo, and you can attack the slicer from there. I think a lot of times people trying to escape like from the saddle, people trying to turn out and turn away from heel hooks. I think it exposes what I always just refer to as the Charles Oliveira heel hook, because it's them turning away from you and you're pulling them back on pulling their weight on top of you to finish that calf. I think it's something that's low risk because if you miss it, most people's defense to missing it is to disengage completely. So it's very rare that you shoot for something and end up in a bad spot off of it. But it's also, I think it's something that is tough to finish because you need to sort of leave your leg behind in that, you know what I mean? Like you're not super safe in your attack from it if they time it the right way. But I'm a big leg lock guy. I love leg locks. I got into I was late to the leg lock game because I was a purple belt when I broke my arm. So when I came back to being able to train again, I was trying to stay my upper body away from people's ability to grab it. And I ended up down by the legs a lot playing the leg lock game. So I think that my fascination with the leg locks came from just flooding my brain with, this is what I do now. I'm a leg lock guy. Let me learn as much as possible. And I don't think that like fascination has really ever left me,
Yeah, I love leg locks too. I went through like a leg lock renaissance at brown belt. But nowadays I just like crushing people from top half guard and mounting them and then roadhouse choking them.
Well, I was just talking to
you know what the roadhouse choke is?
No.
It's the non-consensual sex choke.
Oh, okay.
My professor calls it the roadhouse choke.
I can dig that.
Of like there's
the previous name for it I think is
cool
happily retired. I think roadhouse choke is a better name than the previous name for that position.
Right. But it's actually shockingly effective. There is I think there is validity to it. I remember when he first started showing it to me, I was kind of like, man, this is not going to work. But I hit it all the fucking time now. If you find out how to displace your weight, I actually did an episode with my coach Rob about it, and it is effective. It also just fucks with the guy, right? It makes him uncomfortable. But I've definitely gravitated more towards like a top pressure fundamental style game. When you speak about calf slicers, I've been pretty critical of calf slicers on the show. It's not a move that I go for because I've seen so many guys hurt their knees doing it. But the only time that I've really seen guys hurt their knees doing it is when their opponent is in like a sprinter stance, you know, and they're like strong enough to kick their legs straight. But if you have an opponent belly up, I find that it's a very effective move because they're out of base and they can't explode out of the position, right? They're just not, they just don't have a good enough alignment, a good enough stance to destroy the move. And I will say that if somebody puts me in a calf slicer, I fucking tap because my right knee, the meniscus, whatever I have left there is like, it does not like calf slicer like movement. So I'm one of those guys that will absolutely tap to a calf slicer.
Well, Matt, I can make a confession now because we've known each other for about like 45 minutes. So I will confess.
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys who hurt their knee attempting a calf slicer.
Yeah. Was the guy in a sprinter's position?
It wasn't even that. It was I was way too late to the game where I was playing like, I want to say I was playing like reverse De La Hiva or De La Hiva or something. Like I was playing an open guard. He was standing and I went to like roll underneath and he just turned away, like to like disengage and walk away from it. Right. And I saw his foot was there. So I grabbed his foot and I threw my shin behind his calf. I had no business doing it, right?
Seems like a good idea at the time.
Seemed like a good idea at the time, right? So my mindset is like, oh, perfect. I've got this. I'm holding from behind, I'm holding the front of his ankle. My shin is in the crook of his knee. His leg is not bent nearly enough because he's standing upright. And as I reach up, I grab his hip with my other hand. And I start trying to just force myself into the position. I'm trying to pull him with my hands and push with my foot.
But is he on all fours?
No,
like
he's
what position is he in?
He's standing. He's standing and facing away
from me.
Like
a matrix hook type thing.
Yeah,
like
kind of, but like a very bad matrix hook. Very I shouldn't have done it. But I was just desperate because this dude's really good, a very good black belt. And I'm like, all right, I got it. I'm going to get him. I was not, spoiler alert.
Is this a competition? Or
no, this was in training.
Sparring?
This was in training.
Okay.
I was not about to get him because as soon as I pulled with my hands and like extended my foot away, just the most violent pop I've ever felt in my knee. And it felt like if you've cracked a joint, you know, that feeling, but amplified by 1,000. I was like, well, that's not good. Like that hurts. That's not good. And I ended up, I had like MRIs and all that, whatever. I had to have surgery because if you're looking at your knee, like the back outside corner of your knee, there's like ligaments and stuff there. I tore all of those. And they said it was the same injury they see in motorcycle accidents where someone drops the bike and the bike falls on their knee. It forces your leg to bow and it tears all that stuff. So I tore all of that. I had a small tear in my ACL. So I had to go in and have surgery, and they put like a cadaver ligament where they made like a new triangle of ligaments in my knee. And like, it's fine now, but like 2 weeks after that happened, I saw Lachlan Giles had posted something about, you know, if you're going to elevate with a butterfly hook, your knee needs to be facing up. If you have a butterfly hook, but your knee is parallel to the mat and you try to elevate your leg sideways, it's the same injury I just had. It's going to tear all your stuff. Your knee's not meant to bear that load. And I learned that the hard way.
It's like what happened It sounds like what happened when Gordon fought João Gabriel Rocha and he blew his knee off of a butterfly elevation. His knee was like sideways.
Dude,
and João is just so fucking big, and he just sprawled on it.
Your knee is not meant to bear the weight that way. Your knee is not meant to have your knee forced to the outside while your toes and your hips go to the inside. It just doesn't work that way. And that sucked. I had surgery and, basically like 8 to 9 months missed of jiu-jitsu and training and everything.
Yeah.
So
did you have meniscus issues?
I don't remember. I remember I had a small tear in the ACL. I don't remember if the meniscus had any problems or not because they were fixing like 5 things when they were in there. I've never had a injury to my knees that involved the meniscus. Like, oh, you tore your meniscus. Like I've had like a year after that, I dodged a bullet. I popped my knee a little bit on my other side and they were like, this is an injury that typically shreds your meniscus, but your meniscus is fine. So like, I don't know if I have superhero meniscus guy, but I've been lucky in jiu-jitsu. I've only had like a handful of injuries and most of them I've done to myself. The second knee injury I had was, I was playing rubber guard in competition and I was going for a go-go plata and it was a very similar injury. I really, really, really wanted the go-go plata because who doesn't want to hit a go-go plata in competition? And I was pulling my toes way too close to my face. Same thing. My knee kind of like popped a little bit. Unfortunately, there was no like tears or anything, but that was, that injury is part of the reason why my wife gets nervous when I compete, because as soon as that happened, my brain was like, oh, okay, your leg will be more flexible. Just keep jamming it in front of his face because if your knee's torn, there's nothing keep it. So just like my brain I don't rationalize when I'm competing. I'm just whatever I'm going to do to win. So she gets real nervous that I'm just like not going to tap to something or I'm going to hurt myself just to win the match, which I like to think now at 37, I've learned better to like not do that kind of thing, but
totally
competition is competition. You know what it's like.
I would totally agree with you where it's like most of the injuries I've had, I've done them to myself. And every time you get an injury, you kind of realize a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about the game and being cautious. Like these young 20-year-olds who've never had injuries, they just fucking go in there and they make moves without considering those reactions. And then like, as you get older, you do become more cautious because you've been in those situations and you're like, man, if I get injured right now, that could be months on the shelf. It could mean surgery. It could mean I have to completely change my game. Like once you've gone through something like that, yeah, it can definitely change your whole outlook.
Well, that's what
it's good. It's good that your meniscus isn't injured because fuck, that sucks. I have meniscus issues with my right knee and it sucks so bad.
Well, when I broke my arm, and I broke my arm in August of 2016 and it like just wouldn't heal. I call it a non-union, like where the bones just like literally won't touch. There's a gap. And I had to have surgery again to try to fix it. And they found all the infection and, long story short, it was a bunch of surgeries and my bone still might not touch. I have not had an x-ray in like 4 or 5 years because it doesn't matter. But there was a chance that it was just like, all right, well, you can never do jiu-jitsu again. You can never do any kind of like physical sport again. And realizing that like, you just really don't know. You could get injured tomorrow and that could be it. Like not even change your game, not change your schedule. It just might be you don't do this anymore. And that injury, plus the knee one where I kind of did it to myself, trying to go for a calf slicer in a time when I had no business going for a calf slicer and hurting myself, that also showed me that sometimes accidents can just happen. And if you're not taking precautions and you're not fighting that part of your brain that says like, hey, your knee's torn, so it's better to put your, bend it in front of his face easier. If you can't find a way to turn that part of your brain off, you might be like on the clock a little bit. There's a finite number of minutes you can do jiu-jitsu if you're going to be hurt all the time. So I try to tell the young guys at our gym all the time, like train hard, push your body as much as you can, but also be aware that injuries are a real thing and injuries can really screw your life up.
Yeah, you learn a lot about yourself when you get injured. How do you stay up to date with current jiu-jitsu meta?
Well, like
holy fuck, this cat.
I because I have the ability to work from home, I have a lot of time on my hands. And, and that's the thing where, talk about content creation and making videos and all that stuff. It's because I have that time. I have a really boring job, which is great because it gives me more time to try to see everything. As a blue belt, I was like, I don't want to ever get to a position where I don't know what it is. I don't want ever someone to ask me like, oh, do you know what, this really wonky, weird 10th planet thing is? And I don't know it. Like, I want to know everything. So I've always had the mentality of I just want to watch everything I can. If I go on Reddit and there's something that I've never seen before, I'm going to watch it. When there's, the UFC Invitational and Who's Number Ones and all those, as much as I hate to admit that I didn't watch it yet from last night, I will watch every single match because I don't want to miss anything, because I think our game changes so fast. So many new things come in so quickly and you have to be proficient in them. So I think that I'm very aware of the privilege I have, that I have the time where I can watch, I can watch jiu-jitsu hours every day. I can be on Instagram every day seeing what's happening. I think TikTok is a hellhole for jiu-jitsu, but that's a whole separate issue, so I don't really bother there. But
hellhole in general.
Yeah, just not for me. But I'm also not really the target market for TikTok. But just trying to watch as much jiu-jitsu as possible, I think, is one of the best pieces of advice I would give to someone who's just getting into training. Because not even like instructionals, I think instructionals can be overwhelming for people sometimes because you take in so much instruction that it's hard to apply everything and you can miss pieces. I think just watching matches and seeing what's happening and seeing what the best guys in the world are doing, I think is a huge asset. And I think that that's a good test for if you think you've come up with something new, if you think you're hitting a new technique, if you think it's good, but you can't find a single example of someone doing it at black belt in competition, it's probably not as good as you think. And the only way you're going to know that is by watching a lot of black belt competition. You have to be plugged into every match that's happening.
And try to hit it on black belts.
And try to hit it on black belts.
You might have something if you're hitting it repeatedly on good guys and you're not seeing it anywhere. You're like, okay, this might be a legit discovery. And again, just like injuries, it's funny how it takes time and experience to actually take an objective look at like something new that you discovered and see, is it legit or not? I always have white belts coming up to me and they're like, I saw this on Instagram. Would this work? And I look at it and it's just like complete bullshit, right? And it's like, no, that's not going to work. I can just tell because the other person is, not presenting any kind of resistance. There's no breaking of their base posture structure. It's just like a move, and you've never seen it at a high level competition or, well, they try and put it on you and you could feel it right away.
That's one of my favorite kinds of videos to make, not just because people seem to like that video, but seeing content and then would this work? Like I always call it the trying jiu-jitsu from Instagram series, like nonsense technique, as opposed to me making a video like this is why this is bad, this wouldn't work and whatever. Just literally try to do the technique, show the post someone made and then try to do it and show how it doesn't work. And anytime I get criticism in the comments where someone's like, no, like it totally works. Like, you don't know that guy is so-and-so's coach. He's a legend, blah, 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 blah. Right. My response to them always is send me video of someone at black belt doing this in competition. If you can show me that video, I will issue a retraction. I will happily say, I did it wrong. I wasn't doing the technique right. You're right. It's great technique. And so far, no one has answered that challenge. Anytime someone has told me I was wrong for saying something that Priit shows or Eric Paulson shows, and I say that it's not good technique, every time they say I'm wrong, they still can't produce video of it ever happening in competition. So I think that's the best test.
The grilled chicken guard.
Like, what are we doing?
You study Priit stuff?
Dude, I try not to post too much negative about like one person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to bully anyone or like start a fight with someone. So for that reason, I've had to stop watching anything from Priit because it's really hard not to be like, all right, I got to make a video about this. You know what I mean? And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of like, I'm sure he's a nice dude. I'm sure he's trying to do the best by his students. You know, I've never met him. I don't know him, but like, I don't want to be like, oh, here's another fucking Priit video. Here's another Eric Paulson video. Here's another whatever. I don't want to be like super negative all the time. I just think that one of the, like, obviously I'm a social media guy. I love Instagram. I think it's great for jiu-jitsu. I think YouTube is great for jiu-jitsu, but it also, when you get these white belts and blue belts, seeing some of this garbage technique, because sometimes they have to fill the content machine. Like we all want, you know, if you're trying to make content, you need to make content. And sometimes if the content isn't there organically, you are either posting something you know is not good, or you're posting something you know that's not good on purpose because you know a lot of people will comment on it, which will then drive the algorithm, which will get you more views. And I think that element of social media and jiu-jitsu can be very detrimental. And I like to think that I do my part to be like a positive influence in social media and on Instagram and YouTube and make the sport, I don't want to say better, because it's really presumptuous to be like me, Justin Lesko, is going to make jiu-jitsu better by my Instagram. But like maybe a blue belt will see me doing like a legit technique and not see someone doing bad technique, or will see me showing why a bad technique is bad, or something that will help them more than the nonsense they're seeing. You know what I mean? Like maybe I can influence a little bit.
Marcelo Garcia is stepping back into competition. How do you feel about that?
I love Marcelo Garcia.
We all do.
I mean,
one of the GOATs.
Marcelo Garcia for me is a perfect litmus test, because if you say you don't like Marcelo Garcia, then we're just not friends. Like we're just not on the same wavelength. Like there's the door. I get nervous anytime like a former champion who, I mean, Marcelo Garcia was still ragdoll the fuck out of me. So I'm not saying like past his prime. He's not like early 2000s Marcelo. He's Marcelo now that would still beat the shit out of 99% of black belts. I hope it's all right, because it's against Imanari, who like has been more active than Marcelo, you know, in the last couple of years. And I just want neither of them to get hurt. I want it to be a fun match. I want it to be like when it was like Eddie Bravo versus Hoyler like 10 or 12 years ago, and it was like the rematch, and, you know, they were older dudes. You know, it was a serious match, but it wasn't like no one walked out of there all banged up and you know, ruining the rest of their lives. I hope Marcelo wins.
I heard Hoyler's knee is destroyed, but maybe not.
I think it might have been destroyed before he got there, and maybe that's why he wasn't tapping to that. What do they call it in
vaporizer?
The 10th planet, the vaporizer. I'm glad to see that Marcelo is at a point where he can compete, because after like the stomach cancer and all that, like you just never know. And like 6 months ago, and it was like, oh, Marcelo's back training. Like that was awesome to see. I think it's going to be a great moment for him to like compete again, just coming back from that. You know, that's to come back from stomach cancer and then go out and compete, you know, in pro jiu-jitsu is remarkable. I just want to make sure that no one gets hurt. That's all I care about. Like make it a good match. Please don't get hurt, because you're very dear to me in my jiu-jitsu life. So please don't get hurt. Yeah.
Like I saw ONE FC and Tom DeBlas. I mean, Tom is I think he's running the grappling side of ONE FC or something, and he's like, who do you want to see Marcelo fight? And it's like Tommy Langecker, Cade Rutolo. I'm like, none of these guys.
No,
please.
No.
Let's not do this. He doesn't need to prove himself against like a 21-year-old ADCC champ, like one of the best fucking guys in the world. Like, why would we put him against those guys?
Yeah.
You know, like Imanari, sure. Like Imanari is older. He's a legend. He's super influential. He's not like big, you know, big and strong and young. Like I think that's honestly a reasonable matchup. But like any of the top 10 guys in that weight class, like I don't want to see Marcelo go in there against Andrew Tackett. Right. I don't want to see him go in there against Levi Leary Jones. Like it doesn't make sense for me. And I love Marcelo too, and that's why I don't want to see it, because it doesn't make sense. And like, this is a guy who fucking popularized like Ashi and X-Guard. Like, a lot of what Danaher shows with his system is influenced by Marcelo. So much of what we all do in the modern jiu-jitsu world is because of Marcelo Garcia. So, when I read his book at Blue Belt, this is before you could get instructionals, fucking on BJJ Fanatics. Like, I read his X-Guard book and I was like, this totally changes how I look at jiu-jitsu. Like, I had no idea that it's such a guard even existed. And then you go watch him at ADCC and he's using X-Guard against these beasts, and it's fucking so awesome. So I hope he does right. And I hope like you said, I hope he stays healthy. I just don't need to see him go against these top guys.
No, and
maybe start him off slow and see how it goes.
I think a match versus Imanari is good for both, because like, win or lose, it's not going to tarnish their legacy at all. Like the position both guys are in their lives and in their careers, a win for either of them is great. A loss, like, no one's going to think worse of you. And I think no matter what, it would be like a competitive match. And like, again, no disrespect at all to Marcelo Garcia, but like you said, if you put him in there against like Levi Jones-Lear, like, it's not going to be close. I don't need to see that. I don't need to see BJ Penn on his 7th or 8th loss in a row in the UFC. Like,
yeah,
let's just move on from that chapter. Have a Legends League, have Marcelo versus Imanari and Marcelo versus some other. I don't want to say
like Leo Vieira or something.
Yeah, like, let me see some.
I would watch that.
Yeah, like, I'm down with that. But please don't make this like, oh, Marcelo beat Imanari, now let's get him in there for the ONE FC title, and it's like, let's just
why
pump the brakes.
Why?
Yeah, let's just pump the brakes a little bit.
But what's your favorite submission?
Ooh, well, so I go back and forth between my love and hate for the gi. So sometimes I love the gi, and sometimes I hate it. And I'm currently in a like, I don't like the gi right now. Like, I'm all no gi stuff. So no gi, it's always been twisters. I've always loved a twister. There's just something.
Twisters, wow.
There's just something that's like an extra humiliation about a twister, and it's like very rare. So if you can do it, like, it's really cool. I've only ever come close in competition. I've never finished someone in competition with a twister.
Yeah.
I just think it's one of those weird things where, like, my game is very weird. I have a very weird jiu-jitsu game. In the gi, I love a lapel choke that's like a non-standard lapel choke, like doing like an X choke or something. It's not like my bag, but if I can get to side control and feed your lapel across and turn that into a punch choke with your own lapel, that's my jam all day long. Like, if I can, anything that uses your lapel against you, I really like. And I think that's part of my protest of the gi, because if you're going to make me wear it, then I'm going to use it against you, is sort of my mentality with that. But yeah, I like doing weird things, man. I like playing worm guard. I like using people's gis from side control. I like setting up a Bravo choke, and then instead of like finishing with the arm across, like, just deadlift them off the grip, like, weird things, If it's weird, I like it. I always say that if I'm doing something in the gi, I probably stole it from Keenan. If I'm doing something no gi, I probably stole it from Lachlan or Craig Jones. Weird's the way to be.
How do you feel about buggies?
I love a buggy choke. I don't like that everyone at my gym has gotten really good about defending it by smashing my face, like, with a forearm to like defend it.
Yeah.
A couple months ago, I was competing at an event, and they had posted like a week or two before the event that they were looking for someone to do a match at heavyweight. And I was like, fuck it, I'll do it. Like, I'll do 2 matches. Like, that's fine. Like, if the guy wants to stay on the card, like, that's fine. I'll do it. And, I threw up a buggy choke on him because he was really big and he had very good pressure when he got the side control. And I was like, all right, let's get a buggy choke. And it was on, it was tight. And he was just like, I'm not tapping. Like, I'm good here. Like, so I love it. I wouldn't say I'm great at it. I do like to put it on Instagram because it's kind of like the hot thing. So everyone likes those videos where you hit a buggy choke in training, but never hit one in competition, but not for lack of trying.
Who's your biggest influence in BJJ?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, Keenan in the gi. Like, the second I saw Worm Guard, I was like, man, like, this is for me. And then when I started getting into the leg lock game, I really broke down Craig's game a lot. I think his Z guard that he was playing a lot of like 6-7 years ago, I still play a lot of Z guard in no-gi. I think that would be obviously a big influence. I think I'm supposed to say my instructor. I think that's like how you get brownie points if he's watching this, that my instructor Henry is my biggest influence. But in terms of people that anyone watching this would know, I think Keenan Craig, Lachlan Giles for sure. Those are my big three.
What's your favorite lapel guard? Is it reverse Delo worm?
Yeah, I play that a lot. I also like the like having the same side lapel, and then I use the my non same side foot to do. If you ever saw when Gordon fought Phil Rowe, who I fought Phil Rowe in MMA in my first pro fight, by the way. That's my claim to fame, is that I fought Phil Rowe.
I saw that on your Instagram.
I hope
Did you beat him?
I did. I beat him by a decision.
That's sick.
Yeah, so if he becomes a UFC champion, bro, like MMA math, I'm a UFC champion. But Gordon did.
That'll age well.
Yeah. Gordon did against Phil in their like exhibition match. He used a hook with his foot to like drag Phil's near side foot by and drag by to the back. So I like to use the lapel, like someone's right lapel between their legs, under their right leg, controlled with my right hand, my right foot behind their right foot, and I'm pulling the lapel and I'm pulling at the ankle with their foot, and it just opens the back up so nice to take the back. So I like the reverse Delo worm, but I also like that same side under as well to like drag to the back.
I think reverse Delo worm is like that's what Keenan says is like the most powerful lapel guard if you can get to it. But I think my favorite lapel guard just to use is squid guard. It's so easy to get to, and I like so many attacks from there. Squid double leg is so good.
I haven't played it enough to give you an intelligent opinion on it. I haven't experimented enough to have like a go-to from it, because I tend to, as you should not do, I tend to go to like the ones I like, you know what I mean? And not expand. So we'll talk again in like 6 months now that I'm realizing that I'm not able to adequately have an opinion about one position. So we'll talk again and I'll let you know. Cool.
Justin, I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
What's one new thing you learned this week?
Oh, this week, in jiu-jitsu or just in my life?
Yeah, jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
I mean, you know what? In your life too, I like that. If you want to talk about something you learned in your life, that's cool too. I put you on the spot. I know that's not the easiest.
It's not, but it's making me have a bit of an existential crisis that I can't immediately be like, oh, this is what I learned. Very boringly, I just finished Scott Galloway's book about money. It's called The Algebra of Wealth, and I learned a lot about capital gains that I didn't previously know, which is boring and not at all related to the conversation we're having right now about jiu-jitsu. I have one. I actually have one. Do you ever play like Choi Bar, arm saddle at all?
Yeah, of course.
Last night, my instructor was showing one of the other brown belts. You've trapped the arm, but you still have like almost like K guard with your legs. You don't have that leg brought all the way over to tuck in for the Choi Bar. I've always had the mindset of I need to swing my leg all the way over in front of their face and tuck the foot in. Okay. I should have already known this, but he showed me how I can just drag my foot from one side of their head, like put my shin on their neck and my knee by their other ear, and then just pop it over that way. He showed me a shortcut to bring my leg over for the Choi Bar, because what I just described was terrible for anyone not watching that technique happen right now and listening to me talk. He showed me a hack for how I can get my leg from one side of the person's body to the other for the Choi Bar, which I tried.
Send me a video. I see.
I will. I'll send it to you, and then I'm sorry anyone who's watching this, and I gave you a terrible description. But that is the newest thing I learned, a hack for moving my leg from one side of a person's body to the other without making too much space and getting past.
And jiu-jitsu is so cool that way. Like you can have a move that is fully ingrained in your repertoire. It's part of your, it's a system at this point. And then you'll see like a little detail or an insight that changes it. And now you have like another avenue that you can go to, or you can hit it from somewhere else, or you have a new insight on that move. Those moments are everywhere in jiu-jitsu. It's so fucking cool, right?
And that's what like jumping way back to what we talked about previously, if you have an instructor that is seeking out new information that can bring new information to you, that's how you keep it fresh. You learn new things and you learn those new chains because maybe you wouldn't have explored it, but they did, and now they're bringing it to you. And I think that's the measure of a good instructor.
Sweet. Justin Lesko, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Justin Lesko. I do have a podcast as well called That Jiu Jitsu Podcast. I tried to name it something nice and simple because I noticed, like, if I'm talking to my wife, I'd be like, oh, I was listening to that movie podcast I like, or I was listening to that cycling podcast that I like. They don't need to know the name. I would never say the name. So I just went with That Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. So you can tell your wife or significant other, I was listening to That Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, and you would be factually accurate. So you can find me there. On YouTube, I'm keeping the same theme. It's just That Jiu-Jitsu Guy. I try to post interviews with people. I try to post technique. I post a lot of like video blogs, like preparing for tournaments, at competitions, stuff like that. I have a TikTok. I don't even remember what it is. I think it's That Jiu-Jitsu Guy. It might be. Don't follow me there. Just follow me on Instagram at Justin Lesko. I appreciate it. I try to put out content that I think will help people, will be positive in people's lives, and will help people get a little bit better at jiu-jitsu every time they come hang out with me.
That's awesome. And we're going to include all of those links in the show notes at the bottom. And definitely check out That Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. Justin Lesko, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fun chat, buddy.
Dude, Matt, I appreciate it, man. This is why I love doing podcasts and why I love jiu-jitsu and just getting to hang out with people. Like, if I didn't have a podcast and you didn't have a podcast, we wouldn't get to hang out for an hour and just talk about jiu-jitsu and stuff from opposite sides of the continent. So, like, I appreciate you having me on. I'm a big fan of your show as well. So it was a big honor for me to come on, and thanks so much for having me. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Oh, man, for sure. Anytime. That was a lot of fun. Where are you out of? New Jersey?
Yeah, I'm in New Jersey. It sucks. I can't complain about the cold because you're in Canada, but yeah, it's cold, dude. I hate the winter. No, I hate it so much.
Honestly, I think New Jersey is probably colder than Vancouver. Vancouver's not that cold. It's pretty mild most of the time. Yeah, I might get snow. Maybe not.
We were out in Vancouver. My wife and I do a thing where we try to go to, I love hockey. I always say that if I was as good at hockey as I am at jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't do jiu-jitsu. I would just do hockey because I'm not very good at hockey. But my wife and I try to go to one Flyers away game every year, and it takes us to places we wouldn't normally go. And we went to Vancouver when she was 3 months pregnant with my my oldest, and had just not morning sickness, just all day sickness. So we did make it to the game, but it was not a solid couple days. So I'll try to push her for a return trip to Vancouver at some point, and that way we can get some rolls in.
Dude, that'd be so awesome. You're always welcome at On Guard. And if I ever come to New Jersey, hopefully that doesn't happen because I have been there, and I got to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan. But if I ever do go there, I'll hit you up, and hopefully we can get some training in.
Well, you know what? If you come near me, it's not so bad because I am as far away from New York City as you can possibly be. I can see Pennsylvania from my house on the other side of the river. So we're like central Jersey on that coast of the state. So it's better than where you might have been. If you've been to the shore or you've been like outside of New York, not the best. You can come hang out with me though.
All right, sounds good, buddy. All right, guys, remember the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu Podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. Have a good one. See you later.
Thanks, Matt.